Good evening. Strategic Command Headquarters sits deep beneath Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. Reinforced concrete, electromagnetic shielding, communication systems designed to survive nuclear war. And inside this facility, behind blast doors that weigh tons, operators monitor warning systems 24 hours daily. Monitor for the signals that indicate great power confrontation is moving from political tension toward military crisis. Monitor for the patterns that suggest adversary is shifting from peacetime posture toward war preparation. And at 0300 hours this morning, those systems triggered. Not single sensor failure, not isolated anomaly. Multiple systems, simultaneous alerts. Patterns that match specific scenarios planners hope never to see outside exercise conditions. Russia had shifted strategic posture. The first indicator came from space-based infrared sensors, satellites that detect thermal signatures from missile launches, from aircraft operations, from any activity that generates heat above baseline levels. The sensors registered increases at multiple Russian strategic facilities, not launch signatures, not the massive thermal blooms that ballistic missile ignitions produce, but smaller signatures, signatures consistent with increased readiness, with generators activating, with systems powering up, with facilities that normally maintain minimal activity suddenly showing energy consumption patterns that suggest operational preparation. Communications intercepts confirm the pattern. Russian strategic forces increased encrypted traffic volume, not routine communications, not scheduled message traffic, emergency protocols, high-priority channels, message formats that intelligence agencies recognize as command directives rather than administrative coordination. And the traffic was synchronized. Multiple commands receiving similar instructions within compressed timeframes. This was not decentralized activity, this was centralized coordination. Someone high in Russian command structure had issued orders that multiple strategic units were executing simultaneously. Satellite imagery added visual confirmation. Russian mobile missile systems, units that normally remain in garrison or storage, showed movement. Not deployment to forward positions, not operational launches toward targets, but movement from storage to staging areas, movement that positions systems for potential rapid deployment, movement that reduces time between decision to act and capability to execute. And this movement occurred across multiple military districts, not isolated to single region, not concentrated near any particular border, distributed, suggesting this was not response to localized threat, but change in overall posture. The analysts watching these indicators converge understood immediately what they were witnessing. Russia was elevating strategic readiness, and elevation of strategic readiness by nuclear-armed great power triggers specific response protocols. Protocols that exist precisely for this scenario. Protocols that require immediate notification of senior officials. Protocols that activate emergency briefing procedures. Protocols that begin the process of determining whether this is defensive posture change, offensive preparation, or strategic signaling designed to create psychological effect without actual intent to escalate militarily. Within 15 minutes of the initial alert, secure communications reached the Pentagon. Senior officers were contacted regardless of hour. Duty officers activated recall procedures for key personnel. Analysts began pulling archived intelligence to determine whether current Russian activities match any historical patterns, whether this resembles previous Russian exercises, whether this could be misinterpreted readiness increase during routine training cycle, or whether this represents genuine shift in Russian strategic calculus. The answer came quickly. This matched no known exercise schedule, matched no routine readiness cycle. The scope of simultaneous activity, the types of units involved, the communications patterns, all suggested deliberate strategic message. Russia was demonstrating that it can shift from peacetime posture to elevated readiness rapidly, that it can coordinate across vast geographic distances, that it retains command and control capability to synchronize strategic forces, despite Western assessments that Russian military has degraded under pressure of Ukraine conflict. From Moscow's perspective, this demonstration serves clear purpose. Russia believes American pressure is increasing, believes NATO is escalating support for Ukraine, believes Western weapons deliveries are crossing thresholds Russia defined as unacceptable, believes economic sanctions are designed to inflict permanent strategic damage, and Russia concludes that deterrence is eroding, that Washington no longer fears Russian response, that American leaders believe they can pressure Russia indefinitely without consequences. So Russia responds by demonstrating consequences are possible, by showing that strategic forces remain capable, by proving that escalation pathways exist that Russia controls, by forcing Washington to confront possibility that continued pressure might trigger responses that create genuine crisis. This is strategic signaling. This is how nuclear powers communicate resolve when words seem insufficient, when diplomatic protests go unheeded, when the adversary appears to believe that military options are off the table. But from Washington's perspective, Russian posture change looks threatening, looks like possible preparation for escalation, looks like Moscow might be positioning for actions that require strategic forces to be ready. And when you cannot verify intent, when you cannot know whether readiness increase is defensive signaling or offensive preparation, you must assume worst case, must prepare for scenarios where Russian intent is aggressive, must activate your own response procedures to ensure that if crisis escalates, American forces are postured appropriately. Inside the Pentagon, emergency briefings began at 0400 hours. Intelligence agencies presented assessments. Military commanders outlined response options. Policy officials evaluated escalation risks. And the fundamental question dominated every discussion. What does Russia intend? Is this warning designed to deter further Western escalation? Is this preparation for potential Russian military action? Is this testing American response to see how quickly Washington can adapt to changing threat environment? Each possibility requires different response. Each creates different risks, and none can be ruled out with confidence based on available intelligence. The rapid escalation models ran continuously, analysts inputting current Russian posture, modeling what happens if readiness increases further, calculating how much warning time would exist if Russia decided to transition from elevated readiness to actual operations. And the results were uncomfortable. Warning time is shorter than previous models assumed. Russian ability to move from current posture to operational capability is faster than defense planning anticipated. And that compression of timelines means American decision-making has less margin for deliberation, verification, consultation with allies. NATO allies were informed through restricted military channels, not public statements, not diplomatic notifications. Direct communications between defense ministries, between intelligence agencies, between military commands, because public statements about strategic alerts create panic, create market reactions, create political pressures that complicate crisis management. So information flows through classified channels where it can inform defensive preparation without triggering public alarm that might itself become destabilizing. European defense officials responded by quietly elevating their own monitoring, increased surveillance of Russian activities along borders, enhanced readiness of rapid reaction forces, reviewed contingency plans for scenarios involving Russian escalation, not mobilization, not visible military preparation that Russia could interpret as aggressive, but measurable increases in alert posture that prepare for possibility that Russian readiness increase represents something more serious than signaling. The most alarming aspect of Russian action is not any single element, is not that missiles moved or communications increased or readiness elevated. The alarming aspect is synchronization, is demonstration that Russia can coordinate strategic forces rapidly across multiple domains simultaneously, can execute complex posture changes with operational security tight enough that American intelligence detects only after changes are substantially complete, can compress timelines in ways that reduce American warning advantage that defense planning depends on. Warning advantage is fundamental to American strategy, depends on intelligence capabilities that detect adversary preparations early, that provide time for deliberation, that allow diplomatic efforts before military responses become necessary, that permit consultation with allies, that enable measured escalation rather than rushed reactions. But if warning time shrinks, if adversary can shift posture faster than intelligence can detect and characterize, then warning advantage erodes. An erosion of warning advantage makes crises more dangerous because decisions must be made faster with less information under greater pressure. Inside Strategic Command, operators continue monitoring, continue tracking Russian activities, continue watching for signs that readiness might elevate further, or that current posture might be sustained, or that Russia might signal de-escalation by returning to normal readiness levels. Because understanding Russian intent requires watching what happens next. Single posture change can mean many things. Pattern over time reveals more. But time is precisely what compressed warning windows do not provide in abundance. The strategic alarm that triggered was designed for exactly this scenario, designed to alert when adversary great power shifts strategic posture in ways that could presage crisis. The alarm worked, detected the pattern, alerted operators, initiated response protocols, but alarm systems only provide warning. They do not provide answers about intent, do not tell decision makers whether threat is real or signaling, do not solve the fundamental problem of uncertainty that dominates great power confrontation during periods of high tension. Russia demonstrated capability, demonstrated command and control, demonstrated operational security, demonstrated that Western assessments of Russian military degradation do not apply to strategic forces, and demonstration forces reassessment, forces questioning of assumptions, forces recognition that Russia retains capabilities that make it dangerous adversary even when conventional forces struggle in Ukraine. The Pentagon scramble will continue for hours, for days perhaps. Intelligence agencies will continue gathering information. Analysts will continue modeling scenarios. Officials will continue briefing leadership. And throughout this process, the question will persist. What does Russia intend? The question has no definitive answer yet, may not have definitive answer for days or weeks. And operating in that uncertainty, preparing for possibilities that cannot be verified, maintaining readiness without triggering escalation spiral through overreaction, this is the impossible balance that crisis management requires. NATO is watching. Allies are nervous. Everyone understands that strategic alerts by nuclear powers are not routine events, are not signals to be dismissed as posturing, are moments when miscalculation becomes possible, when fear drives decisions, when both sides can make errors that transform manageable tension into unmanageable crisis. Tonight, Russian strategic forces remain at elevated readiness. American forces have adjusted their own posture in response. Both sides are watching each other. Both sides are calculating. Both sides are preparing for scenarios they hope will not materialize but cannot ignore. And in this watchful preparation, in this mutual calculation, the margin for error has narrowed. The space between stable deterrence and unstable crisis has compressed, and the recognition is settling across Washington that the strategic environment just became more fragile. Not because war is imminent, not because either side wants confrontation, but because Russia proved it can shake the system, can trigger alarms that force American response, can demonstrate capabilities that undermine comfortable assumptions about warning time and escalation control. And demonstration of capability, even without use, changes how both sides think, how both sides plan, how both sides navigate the increasingly narrow path between deterrence that keeps peace and miscalculation that destroys it. The alarm triggered, the Pentagon scrambled, and the strategic balance between two nuclear powers just became more precarious in ways that neither public statements nor diplomatic reassurances can fully address because the underlying reality has shifted. Russia can move faster than expected. America has less warning than assumed. And both sides now operate in an environment where the next move by either side carries risks that neither can fully control, and both must somehow manage without the confidence that previously made crisis management, if not easy, at least imaginable as task that rational actors could accomplish through careful signaling and measured response. But confidence is eroding, warnings are compressing, and the system that kept great power confrontation manageable for decades is showing strains that tonight became visible through single strategic alarm that proved Russia still knows how to make Washington pay attention when Moscow believes attention is required to prevent escalation that serves no one's interests, but might occur anyway through the terrible logic of great powers trapped in competition. They cannot escape, in crisis dynamics they cannot fully predict or control.